Welcome to Unscripted, a podcast with no script by design. We're not following a plan, and that's exactly the point. This show is about whatever's on the minds of your hosts, Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. We'll dig into what's happening in the world, and just as importantly, what isn't making headlines this week. So, with that, let's get started. The conversation could go anywhere because we go wherever the microphones take us. Here's Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. I'm Lannan, he's Giles, and this is Lannan and Giles Unscripted for Friday, October 17th in 2025. Duncan, welcome back.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here and glad to see you made it back from the Badlands.
The Badlands we didn't get to. We were pretty far away from the Badlands. I've been to the Badlands, but South Dakota is. We were in the eastern part, the western part. That's where they have the Badlands. That's where Mount Rushmore is. That's where they have a lot of the fun stuff. And we're kind of in the Great Plains area where it's flat and kind of windy. But we got to go out to the pumpkin patch, visit with the grandkids, daughter, son-in-law. So it was a lot of fun out in South Dakota. But we're glad to be back, as always. And big news for you is that your wife is back from Singapore. 2 weeks ago, when we last did our podcast, she had just left. Now she has just returned, and hopefully she is recovering from all that travel.
Yeah, it's been quite an ordeal just because of the fact, first off, you've got a 12-hour time difference. So by the fact that she was over there for almost 2 weeks, her body had just started getting adjusted to that. And then coming back here. And then, we've had pretty moderate temperatures for October. But, 70 degrees when she came back, it was a little bit, under 70 degrees. And she's been used to close to 90 degrees, 70% humidity, all that fun stuff. So that's another fun thing. And then for folks who don't know, your time in the air flying to Singapore is about 23 hours. Total.
That doesn't count transferring at the airport.
And that's it. From the time she left her hotel to she had to stop this time in Tokyo. Then she had to do stop in Denver for customs, and then on to Indianapolis. It was about from door to door about 28 hours for her, and she doesn't sleep on planes. So.
Even during that period of time, she couldn't sleep on the airplane?
She said she really couldn't get comfortable enough to sleep. She probably dozed for a little while, but for actual sleep, no. When I picked her up at the airport last night, it was she was very tired. Got her made a quick stop at home, dumped off the luggage, went out to grab some dinner.
Did she stay
and then
during dinner? I mean, my God.
Yeah, she did, but you can see her eyes were little slits and poor kid was just like, she was tired, came home, she took a shower, sat for a minute, and then was like, I've got to go to bed. And I'm like, yes, you do. So she's still having that fun. But one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is the airports that she visited. She was talking about the efficiency in Singapore, very, through security, through, things of that nature, going through passport control, very easy, coming and going. Stopped in Japan, no problems. Her main area was security here in the U.S. Now, when she went through customs in Denver, because that was her first stop in the U.S., she made a point of telling the Customs and Border Protection person that she talked to that she said, hey, I really appreciate you working during this shutdown, even though you're probably not getting paid. My husband just retired from being a federal employee of 30 years. So I really feel sorry for you guys and thank you for being here. And the CBP officer said, give me a fist bump. He appreciated that, but she said the security lines in the U.S. We're so far down because we don't have enough TSA employees to begin with. And then you get the shutdown and people are saying, well, I don't want to go to work and not get paid. It's a whole huge mess. So she enjoyed her time there working. Very different culture. She liked Singapore as a city, said it was very clean. People were all very nice, interesting mix of people there. But I don't think it's someplace that she would like to move permanently. Let's put it that way.
Well, Singapore is one of those cities where if you're not from there, you're kind of like not one of them. I don't know how. That's one way I put it. I've seen a couple of people who have tried to move there. Is it's really hard to fit in if you're not a Singaporean, I guess. Uh, but a good place to visit, but living there could be complicated. It's kind of what I've been hearing about. But I'm glad that it went well for her work-wise, and hopefully she got a chance to do a little sightseeing while she was there, and was able to somehow enjoy the trip, even though she's still walking around in that boot. So I hope she got something out of that trip work-wise, and I hope that, and I'm sure you both appreciate coming back to the U.S., particularly your home in Indiana, right?
Yep. I tried to make it as nice as possible, made sure the place was vacuumed. I, changed the sheets on the bed, made sure the dishwasher was emptied. I was keeping on top of stuff pretty much, but I wanted to make sure it was as nice as possible when she got home.
Well, you are the perfect husband. What can I say? Because I'm not.
No, I'm far from that, but I try it. I try and do what I can. Let's put it that way.
Okay, at least for a day, you were a perfect husband. Let's put it that
An
way.
evening, maybe.
Well, Duncan, I'm a big believer in doing follow-ups on stories that we cover. And some of you may remember this if you're regulars listening and watching this podcast. But we did a story previously about some nuns. For those who may have forgotten or just didn't consume that podcast, there are three elderly nuns in Austria that were ordered by the church to go to what's called a care home, kind of something like a nursing home assisted living that we would have in the United States. It's a care home. These nuns hated the care home. They did not want to stay at the care home. Nuns always make, especially teaching nuns, make lots of friends and connections in their local community. So what did these nuns do? They tapped into that. Three of their former students and a local locksmith, who happened to be a friend of theirs, literally broke them out. It's kind of like a jailbreak, broke them out of the care home. And they went back to their original convent. Now, I got some more details I didn't have earlier. Some of these international stories, you can't get a lot of details, but turns out that the church ordered them to the care home because the church had closed the convent. The convent, there was nobody there. In fact, it had been abandoned. They'd cut off all the, like electricity and sewage and water and all that.
Right.
Well, they were overjoyed to be there, but I guess it wasn't even the church. It was the police department in Austria that said, you really can't return to this convent. They called it incomprehensible to go back to this convent because it was abandoned and the rooms were not usable. But you know how nuns are, they are resourceful.
Yep.
The nuns are still there, even with all that. They've had water and electricity connected, probably through their connections with the local
Yeah, exactly.
community. And people are bringing them groceries. The church isn't supporting them, but the community in Austria, where they have had, they've made all these connections, teaching kids, knowing their families, on and on. So now the question is, will the police department, I guess the church is kind of like taking their hands off this at this point, will the police department force these nuns to go back to the care home, or can they stay in this previously abandoned convent? I mean, it's just another example of when nuns set their mind to do something, do not get in their way.
Yeah, I have a great deal of respect for the police in any country. Very much they've got a super tough job to do and all that. All that being said, do not go up against nuns. It's a no-win situation.
Well, the fact that the nuns are still living there, even though the police don't want them there, doesn't that tell you something, Duncan?
Exactly. And, and it's also great publicity for that particular police department to say, oh, yeah, we're still trying to evict the nuns. Really? Is that really right where you want to go?
I'm sure
I don't
that
know of any media spin doctor that can really help you with that one.
yeah, their chief of police has got that all figured out, I think, at this point. Let me move on to another story. I know that you have probably been to some of the zoos around the world. I mean, we have a nice zoo in Indianapolis. I've been to the St. Louis Zoo a couple of times. That's a big, beautiful zoo. I've been to the San Diego Zoo. Well, this happened just the other day at the San Diego Zoo. They have a big gorilla area, and the gorillas, and I think this is actually a good thing, rather than have the bars making them look like they're in jail, they put panes of glass up so you can see the gorillas, they can play, they can see you. Well, some of these young male gorillas get, I don't know, extremely excited and boisterous. And there was one young male gorilla the other day at the San Diego Zoo who shattered the glass of the cage while there were people in the zoo, like, patrons in the zoo. Now, the good news is there were three layers of glass, so there were still two more. But I guess this young male gorilla just got all excited and upset and pounded on this glass and just demolished that first area of glass. Nobody got hurt, including the gorilla. But this is what the zoo official said, quote, "It is common for male gorillas, especially in adolescence, to express these types of behaviors. Bursts of energy, charging, dragging items, or running sideways are all natural for a young male." End of quote. Kind of like young males who are not gorillas.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've seen that type of behavior from guys in bars. Uh,
Right. You were a bar manager. You've seen
yeah,
lots of
so
things.
I'm familiar with a little bit of that, but yeah, absolutely. And I'm just glad nobody was hurt, including the gorilla. But yeah, I mean, I'm very much a proponent. If you're going to have zoos, if you're going to put these animals, try and make the habitat as natural as possible, and much prefer something like a plexiglass or something along that line versus bars. I think that's very nice for everybody concerned.
You know, I was in San Diego, strangely enough, for an NTEU convention, which you went to. So this is back in '95, and my wife went with me, and we have like the one afternoon off as we were, after, on the last day of the convention. So she and I drove out to. There's really two San Diego zoos, one in San Diego, and then one way out in the desert. So we went to the one way out in the desert, and what I enjoyed about this is that what they do for most of this zoo, they don't you don't walk around and see the animals either enclosed or whatever. You go into like a kind of a train like thing and you go around and you watch and the animals are kind of free to roam around. I think, if you're going to have a zoo, to me, that's the best way to do it.
Absolutely, those types of things. And I do have to make a small correction for you, based on my watching of movie history. It's pronounced San Diego.
Where did that come from?
Ron Burgundy, Anchorman.
Oh, the Anchorman movie. Oh man, you go back a long way on that one. I forgot all
San Diego.
that. Yeah, that's he's the only one that ever said that, as far as I
Well,
know.
that's true too. But I try and follow Ron Burgundy. No, in seriousness, those types where the more the animals can roam free in a habitat that's as close as possible to what they have naturally, I'm absolutely in favor of. So I think that's the best type of experience to have.
And I will say that San Diego is a beautiful city. I loved it visiting it.
Mm-hmm.
I do, and I know you've been to conventions there as well, and it's one of I mean, I've been to a lot of different cities, and I can say different things about them. San Diego, it's hard to say very much bad about. It's expensive, I'll say that much.
Yeah, yeah.
But in fact, I talked to somebody who lives there, and they just who was from Indiana, living in San Diego, and all they did was complain about the cost of living, which I understand. But anyway, there's one other story I wanted to pass along. I thought this was a good one. There's a professional tennis player. His name is Giancarlo Oliveira. He represents Venezuela on the international tennis circuit, but he was provisionally suspended in January following a positive drug test for meth, a positive drug test for meth. And they took two different samples, an A and a B sample, and they both came up positive. Do you know what his explanation was for testing
Hard telling.
positive? He said it all the reason he had a positive test for meth was because of a kiss. A
Say what?
He kissed somebody, apparently what, the meth on their lips? That's his story. He's sticking to it, Duncan.
Wow. To me, that's sort of akin to like getting pregnant from a toilet seat. Uh, I don't think it works that way in both cases. That's interesting. Now I've got something that Kim had discovered while she was on her travels that she wanted me to pass along for the podcast. A new Guinness Book of World Record.
Hmm.
I know you're interested in those.
Okay, let's
And
hear
I
it.
think there's doing some research. I think there's going to be some controversy on this one. The longest effort of passing gas,
Yeah.
40 seconds. And this was actually a news story that she caught while she was in Singapore. So it was happened here in America. Somebody passed gas for 40 seconds. And then, the Guinness, because it was recorded and all that, Guinness is apparently certifying this. Well, there's somebody in Britain who apparently supposedly did this recorded for 2.5 minutes a few years ago. So there could be apparently controversy here, in this thing. And I'm like, 40 seconds is something I bow down to anyway, but 2.5 minutes, I would think are you taking oxygen during this time?
Of course, the first thing I would think about is, this whole issue of when you're a young male, we used to always, laugh. That was one of our favorite things to laugh about. But the second thing is, I certainly hope neither one was done in a closed room.
Well, I don't know how big the room was because the one for 40 seconds is on YouTube. I will admit I have not watched it.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Oh, now
Yeah,
whoever's got that on YouTube is gonna have a huge surge just because we
yeah,
mentioned.
I have not watched it and have no desire to watch it. But yes, it is on YouTube. It's some low-level comedian or disc jockey or somebody, DJ, somebody along those lines that did it as a stunt. But like I said, 40 seconds is quite the airing out, so to speak.
I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, maybe at first, glance, 40 seconds doesn't seem to be that long, but it is. But it is. For, you're expelling air from your body for 40 seconds. I can't believe 2.5 minutes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Then you think about the 2.5 minutes, and it's just like you've got to be taking oxygen or doing something, or I don't even want to know what the prep, so to speak, was for that one.
Well, there's a serious subject I want to talk about briefly here, and it's because it's near and dear to my heart. I made my living in journalism from the mid to 70s off to about 1983. Made my living as a talk show host, journalist, that kind of thing. So it's near and dear to my heart in a very special way. When I retired from government service, I started a news blog where I live. It kind of exploded. People really wanted this information. There's a hunger out there for journalism. So I think people care about it. They want independent, straight journalism. Well, something's happening at the Indiana Daily Student. It's kind of a complicated situation. We're trying to narrow it down as much as I can. Now, the student newspaper used to publish, I think, daily, years ago as a print edition. I was on the IU campus several times, and I would always see it everywhere. You could always pick up a copy of the Indiana Daily Student. They had so much advertising that they were able to be self-sufficient. Well, those days, of course, are long gone for all print publications. They've gone more online, and they've had to rely more on the university for their funding for the print editions. Well, now it's come down to, I think there's like 4 times during the year when there's a print edition, and that was the deal with the school administration. They would cover all or some of the cost of the printing. Well, there was a special homecoming edition. IU, we're again on the 17th of October, we're recording this. IU's homecoming game with the Michigan State is the day after we record this. There was going to be a print edition, kind of a special edition of the IDS, Indiana Daily Student, about homecoming. Well, the university wanted it to be kind of like a public relations puff piece, like a rah-rah kind of thing, which, that has its own place, and the university could have done that. But IDS said, that's not really our role to do that. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
we're a newspaper, we're supposed to be journalists. And they have the director of student media, an employee of the university. He was their faculty advisor for the student newspaper. His name is Jim Rodenbush. Well, the university, told him to do this, and he said, "No, I'm not going to do that. That's content restriction, and you shouldn't be doing that." So what did the university do the day after that? They fired Mr. Rodenbush. Now, the university's story is, well, we pay for the print edition. We're going more online anymore. Uh, we really don't think that was right. But the university students, who are the people who publish this and write it and edit it, they said, hey, if they can do this for the print edition, they can do this for the digital edition as well. So
Yep.
it's like, and so now what has happened is a firestorm of criticism in terms of freedom of speech. The financial restraints are there. People understand that. But it's free speech organizations, student editors, press advocates around the nation and the world have denounced this whole thing in Indiana. IU is getting a reputation for not being able to handle speech they don't like. It happened during some demonstrations over the Middle East, but they tried to put restrictions on that. And many people who are observers of universities worry that this is an outgrowth of all of that. But editorial independence is still something very important. Oversight, you want to make sure you're being ethical and you adhere to standards of journalism. But editorial independence is critical if you're going to be believed and you're going to be credible. But the timing, the suddenness of this puts it all into question. And lots of people have now said they are no longer going to give to the university in general and to the newspaper in particular. Mark Cuban, who most people
Yep.
know, said censorship is not the way. That's exactly the way he put it. And Mark Cuban has given lots of money to Indiana University. He is an IU grad and he loves IU and always is willing to say that, but he's got a problem with IU at the moment. So I think that what I would like to say about this, there's so many, and I've known a lot of people I worked with in journalism who worked at IDS, the Indiana Daily Student. Um, the whole heart of this is not print versus digital. That's what the university is trying to say. But I think firing a faculty advisor for refusing to control or censor student work sends a really chilling message, I think. And that's the real message here. And the university's like, hey, they've got public relations people. If they want to put out some kind of print publication for for homecoming, they can do that.
Yep.
To force the IDS to do that because they're paying for it is pretty heavy-handed. And I really like to hear your take on this.
Yeah, I think that they're basically trying to use IDS's credibility to further their own message. And, I do give credit to all those involved from IDS for saying, no, that's not what we want to do. The freedom of the press is, one of the bedrocks of our democracy. And, there's a lot of pushback on this, but I heartily applaud those who are standing up to it. IDS, what's happening at the Pentagon right now, where, the Pentagon had said, we want you, as reporters to do this certain thing. And every single network or major media outlet has said, no, we are not going to do this. It's freedom of the press. We're going to continue to report on and do what we need to do. And you're absolutely right on the editorial content. There has to be that freedom to, say what you see, remark on it, things of that nature. We are not in a police state. We are not in a dictatorship. We have a constitution that guarantees these rights, and they should, I truly believe the IU administration, who has done some very good things, they absolutely, though, screwed up with the protests, and they have botched totally this situation to me with IDS.
It's interesting to me that, how should I put this? Ethics in journalism are very important. I wrote a piece on ethics in journalism for my blog recently. I was trying to get an interview with a particular individual who had been involved in some controversy, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to come on a podcast or not from me, my local podcasts that I produce here in Fishers. And it was after I published that piece on journalistic ethics that he agreed to come on my podcast. And what my point there was, I get into situations where people will say, well, can you give me a list of the questions you're going to ask? And I'll say, I'll give you the general outline or areas I'm going to ask about. But if you want the actual questions asked, you need to go to North Korea, China, or Russia, because or Iran. That's how they do journalism there. We don't do journalism that way here. And I think that usually gets the message across. I'm glad you mentioned the Pentagon, because I wanted to talk about that too. And as you mentioned, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense or War, or whatever you want to say, uh, has decided he wants to take away press credentials unless you sign a statement no journalist in their right mind would ever sign. I saw that.
Yep.
And there's no way I wouldn't have signed that to a county government to cover the county courthouse, much less the Pentagon. So I think that what the main point I want to make on that is, yes, you can take the credentials away from the Pentagon reporters. You can ban them from the building, but you cannot ban them from reporting. And they are still going to report. And
Oh,
they're
yeah.
probably going to be much more critical of the administration now, covering the Defense Department outside the Pentagon building. I mean, reporters don't get into the CIA headquarters. A lot of very good journalists cover that whole area of government. So I think that you can be heavy-handed about this in the way you want to be because you don't have to be in the building to cover it. I mean, if they wanted to ban me from the county courthouse or city hall, I can still report on the
Yep.
county courthouse and city hall. I know people, and there are plenty of people willing to talk, particularly if they're banning the reporters. I think there are people in government who are even more than willing to talk to me as a reporter and talk about what's going on. So I don't. This is going to backfire on the people who are doing this. And the public is still going to get the information. It's going to be harder for the journalists to work in this, but I think they're going to work harder, and they're still
Yep.
going to get the story out. Your view.
Yep. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. It's the old adage, you'd rather have them inside the tent, urinating out than outside the tent urinating in. And basically what Secretary Hegseth has done, with, I'm sure, the blessing of this administration, is taken this and, every news organization. That's the thing. It's like some that were very favorably disposed to the administration are upset about this as well. So you've created much more of a problem than you're solving, to me. And you're exactly right. There are going to be people who are going to talk to you regardless of, well, we don't want any leaks. Well, there's always going to be leaks. There's always going to be people that are going to be talking
Yes,
if they don't believe in something.
I saw a list of the news outlets that signed that agreement. One was a kind of an offbeat, goofy American one, but one was from Turkey. I can't remember where the others were from, but some offbeat Australian news source. But it wasn't any main, even the Fox News,
Right.
which
Right.
is generally favorable to the administration, not always, but generally so. They refused to sign this. So I think anybody who even tries in any way to be journalistic is saying, no, we really can't be a part of this. I just can't emphasize enough how important freedom of the press is. And it's under attack
Yep.
in a major way in America,
Yep.
financially, as far as the just having a business model that works for journalism. But I think on top of that, we've seen government be very heavy-handed. We've seen it in Indiana on occasion. We've seen it nationally. So I would hope that the public, and most of the time, when this push comes to shove on this, the public is on the press's side. And,
Right.
public's not always on the press's side. In this situation, I think they are. Duncan, we're about out of time. Any final thought?
I've just got a real quick one. Is that we're heading into what's going to be tied for the second longest government shutdown. This needs to get resolved, and my heart goes out to the folks, if this doesn't get resolved, who are on the ACA, where they're either going to have their premiums skyrocket for tens of millions, or 10 million people in the United States who are going to be without health care. That's what this shutdown is about. It is not about, getting it for illegal immigrants. That's not happening there. We need to get this resolved. We need to make sure those subsidies continue, because we do not want to punish the poorest people in our country for doing something that they absolutely have to have.
No, Duncan, the people that would get hurt the most on the ACA changes, people who are self-employed. Because
Yep.
a lot of people I know that are self-employed, and the only way they could ever get insurance was through the Obamacare ACA exchanges. And without those subsidies, it's going to be unaffordable for them. They're not going to be able to afford to have health insurance either. So, by the way, the only thing I will add is that for those of you watching on video, United Airlines has not sponsored this podcast. Duncan chose that as his background. I'm afraid to ask why.
Basically, it was just because Kim had long flights, and she did fly on United. It just so happened that this particular background came up that way. But yeah, she did fly United, and the United personnel were very good to her. She very much enjoyed all her interactions with them. But yeah, no, they did not sponsor, nor are we getting any. We're not getting any money from anybody for this podcast. So
yeah, why do we're still trying to figure out why we do it, but we just love doing it. I guess that's the only reason we do.
that's it.
So if all goes well, we will return next week. This is Lannan and Giles Unscripted. We have one ask for you as the audience. Like and subscribe to this podcast. We appreciate it. Duncan and Larry will be back soon with another episode. In the meantime, this is Unscripted.